Well, that's it. The 2022 preseason is done. The regular season is now finally upon us, and the Holy Trinity Show is ready. My producer Rob and I have decided we're going to release shows on Tuesdays, unless there's a midweek game. That way we can recap the game from the previous weekend and also look ahead to the following weekend while still allowing ourselves some time on the weekends for ourselves and our families, because we both work very hard. And we just thought that this was a smart way of doing things. So here we go. We're ready. Let's recap Stade Rennais, look ahead to Bournemouth, the captaincy, the transfer market, all of it. And I'm pairing it with something pretty special, the best in my opinion, the Hibiki Suntory Whiskey. Because I think this really was the best preseason in recent memory. So let's go. Now, before we get into Stade Rennais, a word about the captaincy. Am I surprised John McGinn was named captain by a former midfield general type legend? No. Is Emi Martinez a worthy captain, or at least vice captain? Absolutely. I have no problem with goalkeepers being captains. You see it all the time. It's a little more awkward when a player is being asked to effect change in a game, however. And of course, there's always the referee relations bit. But I think the bigger surprise is that after such a short period of time, Diego Carlos has been named a vice captain, which says an awful lot about what we're seeing, not just on the field, but what we don't see in training and in the gym, off the field. This guy has clearly impressed everybody, and I'm starting to get the feeling that he could end up being an all-time Villa fave. Now, with John McGinn, there is an interesting parallel with what's happening now at Villa Park, with what happened when Steven Gerrard first arrived at Ibrox, when Lee Wallace was the incumbent captain at Rangers. And although he was having some injury problems, disciplinary contractual issues, still a big shout to strip a club captain who brought them up through the lower leagues and hand it over to James Tavernier. Wallace moved on to QPR, and Tavernier helped Gerrard and Rangers eventually win the championship. And my Rangers fans say that this guy is forever etched into the Roll of Honor at Ibrox. Like, he is a legend, and that captaincy helped take him to the next level. So when a guy like Steven Gerrard, with his background, his career, his stature, his aura, says, you're the guy to take this huge club on, it's got to mean something, and surely it has to be an incredible boost to your confidence. Now, if you've watched this show before, you know how I feel. There are things about John McGinn I love. What he needs to become is more consistent. For example, just looking at this, I wish he could cut these types of things out of his game where he gets caught in possession. And when he does, so many times, it's a break the other way. In this case, Emi Martinez was forced to make a very good save. Otherwise, it's 2-1 Rennes there. Now, I could definitely see how the honor of the armband for a club the size, scale, and with the history of Aston Villa could actually help John McGinn increase his level of professionalism and consistency because of the added responsibilities that the armband entails. I could also see how it might take the pressure away from Tyrone Mings and allow him to focus on his football, and he's going to have to focus on it, possibly to earn his place back. And Steven Gerrard said pretty much the same thing. He also said that wearing the armband is absolutely no guarantee of minutes or places. So there feels like there's still maybe a little bit of a hedge to this decision. And it's really about the players who are most likely to appear week in and week out. So perhaps this situation still evolves as the season progresses. Now, I wouldn't read too much into Tyrone Mings not starting in France and being part of the group that played Fulham on Friday night along with Callum Chambers, but I am starting to wonder if it is going to be Chambers who lines up next to Diego Carlos on opening day. Those two put into that Fulham lineup, not a lot of information on it, but I'm sure because they wanted to dot a young group with some of the veterans like Buendia and Ings and Nakamba. I'm sure Kane Kessler-Hayden would have got a run out, maybe Ben Crescenti as well, along with others. So that was a smart move to get 90 minutes out of all those guys. I mean, this preseason has been so well managed, and, Villa beat Fulham 1-0. Danny Ings scoring the goal, another Premier League opponent. Last year, you remember, they didn't even play one Premier League opposition before they finally kicked off at Watford, which was a disaster. The lack of fitness. You remember Target? And even Buendia nobody looked fit in that game. This preseason has been so well managed. It is night and day from a year ago. First of all, this opponent was a worthy adversary. Stade Rennais finished 4th in Ligue 1, a point back of Monaco and the Champions League places, so they qualified for the Europa League. Only PSG scored more goals than they did, and not by much. And their coach, Bruno Genesio, was the Ligue 1 Coach of the Year. So no slouches, no pushovers, and they had a very early lead at home. But wouldn't you know it, Aston Villa hung around. They weathered some of that heavy pressing, and for the second straight game in a row, a center back scored off a set piece. This time, Diego Carlos, who capped off another very impressive performance for the Brazilian. What I love about this is the mentality. The mentality is starting to take shape, and so is some momentum heading into the season. Leon Bailey just carries on from where he left off against Manchester United in Australia, and he kind of chops the cross that Luca Dean sends in, but doesn't matter, goal scorers find a way, and it should be noted that that goal doesn't happen if Ollie Watkins doesn't win an aerial duel to head the ball down to Luca Dean in the first place. Now, that doesn't dismiss the growing Ollie Watkins anxiety, and I have to admit I was very surprised he missed that chance in the second half, a beautifully swerved in ball from John McGinn, and he just had to go back across goal, and it was very straightforward. In fact, it was very much like the goal he scored at Burnley at the end of last season, which John McGinn provided. But I refuse to jump on the hysteria over this player right now because he does a lot of good things, and he did a lot of good things in the Rennes game. And I'm going to wait and see on this guy because I still believe he's a very unusual and different kind of striker than you see around the league. It's funny that both SG and Bailey himself said the same thing. He is starting to trust his body again. Imagine worrying that your next strike or pass may sideline you for weeks. How are you supposed to play freely that way? And this guy's a sprinter who happens to be able to manage a football very nicely. So his body mechanics are different. Credit to him. Credit to who the Jamaican uses as a personal trainer. He has a fantastic mentality, and I get the sense that he is very, very popular among his teammates. I mean, how can you not love a Jamaican? If you can't love a Jamaican, there's something wrong with you. I mean, is a 10-goal season realistic for this guy? Imagine what a boost that would be for this team. And here's a guy who's been very resilient. He's overcome a lot in his life, and I couldn't be happier. Find some wood to touch. Stay healthy, Leon. Like the Brisbane Roar game, Aston Villa really mixing it up from the set-piece routines, particularly the corners, and it worked out well for Ashley Young. He received a short pass and absolutely shaped a perfect ball for Diego Carlos to head home for the late winner. And, high percentage crossing locations and mixing things up to keep the opponents unsure just seems logical and prudent to me. And hopefully, Little Phil can be recalibrated just ever so slightly, so instead of the woodwork, it goes top corner when the real deal starts this weekend. Now, I noticed in this game and at several points throughout the preseason that Aston Villa is not afraid to play a driven, direct ball that bypasses a lot of players, especially when they're being pressed. And we have the players that can do it now. Dean was always able to do it, but Carlos can, Kamara certainly can, and Callum Chambers, who knew? In this game, Martinez drove one long that found Watkins off the free kick where he was fouled. Konza slithered one through. Coutinho found Watkins. And when you're being pressed, I'm starting to wonder if Villa was setting traps because Rennes pressed a lot. And usually the triggers for a press is a slow backwards ball or a bad first touch. Now, here's what I mean by setting traps. Like, did Aston Villa invite Rennes forward here as Luca Dean gets the ball? Look at the press, 1, 2, and there's probably a third in your screen there. And this is Luca Dean's right foot. This isn't his stronger foot. Luca Dean sends one on an absolute rope. And now all of a sudden that center back sphincter is twitching because Leon Bailey is in a one-on-one foot race with him. And quite frankly, Bailey probably should have done better. But I'm thinking that's by design. Invite them, then bypass them. And because they have Bailey as a long option now, I think we're going to see this once or twice. One of the big questions I have for this coming season is how many minutes Big Tim Irogbunum will be getting for Aston Villa this season, because every time he's on the park, and yes, it is just the preseason, but he does something special. He has poise, he has strength, he has IQ. Well, here's a great example. I mean, first of all, look at where he's receiving the ball, or at least look at where he's asking for the ball here. This is ridiculous. He's asked for the ball surrounded by 3 guys, almost 4. So now he's facing his own goal, and look what he does. He loses both. He's not afraid of the guy ahead of him, and then he just splits the pass and sends his teammate off and running. I suppose a major factor in how many minutes Big Tim gets this season is what happens with Douglas Luiz. Does he stay and sign an extension? Does he move before the window closes? I think Big Tim is closing in on Marvelous Nakamba and maybe even leapfrogging him. Because I could see a day where it's Big Tim and Boubacar Kamara as double pivots, whether that's solely 6s or 6-8 hybrids. That would not be a lot of fun to play against, because if you manage to get by those two, well, you still have to get past this guy. Now, I've said previously on this show, I'd be shocked if Aston Villa's midfield looks the way it does today by the time the window closes, and the window closes in exactly a month, September 1st. So there is a lot of time to get some deals done if they want to, but they are in such a good position here because they got all of their key incomings done before the window even opened at the end of the season. And so they're in a beautiful position right now. Those players have come in, they're fit, they've integrated, they've gelled, they know their place. This was a shrewd offseason, and anything from here on in is bonus time. But if Villa is to do more business, it cannot be just to make up numbers. We have numbers. There's nothing wrong with our numbers. The academy players can make up the numbers. If you're going to bring in somebody now, they must be clearly better than what we already have. Listen, the COVID impact is still being felt by so many clubs. Many are starving for cash and they need to move players on. So Villa's in a great position just to sit back and wait and see what comes to them. Does a gem fall in their lap? Every player in the world wants to play in the Premier League. It's just a matter of finding the right player. And of course, there's always this issue of having to move some players out as well. You know, that's going to be Anwar El Ghazi, Bertrand Traore by the sounds of it, along with Chukwuemeka. But I don't think that's about balancing the books. It's about making sure that if you're going to take a player on, that player is a standard raising, long-term key addition to your club. All right, here we go. And when I think of Bournemouth, I think of 2 things. Rudy Gestede. In fact, almost 7 years to the day, August 8th, 2015, when he scored off a corner to win the game at the, what was it called then? Dean Court Vitality, can't remember. And the other memory was Villa's first home game back in the Premier League, and Tom Heaton made a diabolical touch that led to a penalty. Dougie Luiz did score a banger, but Villa fell 1-2 on that day, and I think that it's time for Aston Villa to spoil a home return to the Premier League party this weekend. Mr. Suave and Debonair, Mr. GQ himself, Scott Parker, hasn't been super active in the transfer window for Bournemouth in this offseason. I mean, Marcus Tavernier, rumored to be joining from Middlesbrough, Joe Rothwell, Ryan Hendricks. Do these names strike fear into your heart? Those guys came on a free. Let's be honest. The gap between the leagues are widening every single year, and the gap between Aston Villa and their opponents this weekend is just, well, it's so wide. And that's why I keep bringing up this word and why the mentality has to be ruthless this weekend. Aston Villa must be going into this game and expecting to win and win comfortably. Don't tell me it's their first home game back in the Premier League. None of that should matter. It's about being pragmatic at times and ruthless in others. Here's my predicted lineup for Bournemouth, and I think the only real surprise is Callum Chambers, and it's not a surprise given how he's played in the preseason. It's just a surprise that, well, who would have thought he'd be lining up against Diego Carlos? And really, the only question in this lineup is what happens when Phil Coutinho drops into this space, because you know he will. Does John McGinn take up a more advanced position because we saw it again a few times and to good effect. He can cross the ball. He can pick out a pass. We know he can get into the box and shoot, for crying out loud. But Leon Bailey has been the standout performer in the preseason along with Chambers, and he adds a completely different dimension that I think is going to pay off this year. And it's not just about Callum Chambers' defensive efforts, his positioning, even the fact that he chips in with a goal now and again. When he left the side last year, our form dropped. Remember, he plays at Leeds, scores a goal, and then he got pulled out of the side, and we didn't really do very well afterwards. He played 15 minutes on a dodgy pitch against Manchester United with Villa trailing. Watch some of the distribution. Like, look at this ball. This is a 30-yard ball on an absolute dime to Ashley Young. I mean, his first touch is fantastic, but that wasn't the only one. This was probably the dodgiest of them all. You might actually say this was a bit of a reckless pass, but look at it. On a dodgy pitch, and he sends his teammate away. There was other ones too. Longer range passes. Like, okay, you could do it over 20 yards. How about this one? A 40-yard ball right onto Kane Kessler-Hayden's head, and off they go. And then there was the split ball that he played. Again, it's a short ball on a dodgy pitch, but look at, he splits a couple of players, and it's exactly where it needs to be. This is the part of the game that has shocked me about Callum Chambers in the preseason. Yes, I know the fans of the Cherries will be amped up at the Vitality Stadium on the weekend, but this game somehow reminds me of that trip to Burnley late last season when the hosts were desperate for a win to try to stay in the Premier League, and Aston Villa put on an absolute clinic and just really spoiled it with a late, irritating goal against, but otherwise they were in complete control, and that's kind of how I feel that it might be going on Saturday, and I don't think we're going to see a repeat of the debacle at Vicarage Road, Watford last year. Until that time, soak up the sun, be well. Thank you for watching, and as always, up the mighty Villa.